The latest patch in Marvel Snap has just dropped, and we have some absolutely banger changes that we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to get started with the Spider-Man change, because it's absolutely massive. Spider-Man used to be a 5-drop. They used to deny your opponent's opportunity to play into a specific location. Now it's a 3-drop, a 3/5, that on reveal moves to another location and pulls an enemy card from here to there. That's actually pretty insane. It's a really cool ability, and the thing I like about it is that it is much more in line with the iconic Spider-Man. Spider-Man was never about denying a location to somebody. It was about web slinging and movement and going through New York City on the webs and all that kind of stuff, right? The things you'd expect to see in a Spider-Man trailer, right? That's what the iconic Spider-Man is. And the old ability was super polarizing because it worked in Galactus decks and these decks that were really frustrating to play against. So now we have an ability that makes way more sense thematically with Spider-Man. And quite frankly, I love this. In fact, Coccia and I actually discussed this months ago. We discussed how Spider-Man should have a much more thematic ability, and we actually had said it'd be cool if he web slung from one location to another, and here we are. It's finally here. Ultimately, I think this is a great change. It had to happen. Spider-Man is one of the most iconic cards in Marvel altogether. It's by far one of the most popular franchises, and to have it tied behind an ability that pretty much everyone hates and have it be a card that everyone hates was super not cool. I'm so glad they made this change. Spider-Man's back. Alright, this is actually a pretty cool change. We have Cable, who went from a 2/2 that drew from the bottom of your opponent's deck to a 2/2 that draws from the top of your opponent's deck. Now, I know you guys are going to get sick of me saying this here, but we actually had discussed something very similar on the Snapchat, where basically we had discussed okay, Cable felt like it was a little weak. How can we buff up Cable? It was one of my buff candidates, and I had suggested drawing from the top of the deck. Now, a key point of discussion here is going to be that, okay, when you draw from the bottom of the deck, does it really actually matter? Because you're still just denying a card. A card comes out, yes, they didn't technically draw it, but now you know, oh, they don't have their Null, or they don't have their Shang-Chi, and you can play around that fully. It's the information you get that's important. When you draw from the top of the deck, you're still getting the information, but you're denying the card, which is kind of important, right? That denial of card is kind of a huge deal. So ultimately, I do think that this is an improvement in play, but it can definitely be a nerf as well, because if, let's say it's turn 4, and you play Cable, and you draw their I don't know, what's a 1-drop they don't want to play. Their Uatu from their deck. They're not playing Uatu, but you draw their Uatu out. You basically just help them because now they're guaranteed not to draw that 1 cost on turn 5. They're going to draw something else into the deck. Maybe that's when they draw their Spider-Woman or whatever, right? So it has that element to it, which is kind of interesting, but I understand why it feels better to draw the top of the opponent's deck, because you feel like you've denied something. That's a draw they're not going to get, whereas before they were getting it. Because with Cable too, you have to remember, we also have Mirage that just came out, and Mirage is an interesting card that functions really well, and it kind of ate Cable's lunch a bit. So we're seeing a little buff to Cable here. Ultimately, I do think it's a buff. Whether or not it's enough is a question worth asking. Maria Hill still is a complete disaster scenario. I think Maria Hill still needs some love, so maybe Maria Hill gets a little bit extra here, but ultimately I do think this Cable change is necessary, at least to test the waters, to see if, even in Conquest, if this is going to be enough to make Cable relevant. High Evolutionary got knocked down another peg. I'm not sure if it needed it. High Evolutionary is kind of in a weird spot right now from a meta perspective, because we're actually not seeing a lot of High Evolutionary play, but the thing got nerfed. The thing used to hit 1 target 3 times if necessary, or if there was 2 targets, it would hit 1 twice and 1 once, and it would just basically be a 4/9 consistently all the time. Now it hits 3 random enemy cards for -1, so if there's only 2, it only does it twice. If there's only 1, it only does it once. So this is a notable change. It's definitely a nerf, there's no question about it. I feel like it makes sense. This kind of brings down the thing to where you would expect it to be, as opposed to a 4/9 walloper. So this actually makes a lot of sense, but it does take down High Evolutionary a little bit more. I don't know if High Evolutionary needed it. It's one of those things where it's fallen off quite a bit. So you still have Cyclops being by far the strongest card in the High Evolutionary package, so that has remained. So perhaps the decks will start to change around, going around the, maybe you mana cheat out something with this, with the Shocker, and then you go to the Cyclops and a lane, etc. So there's going to be a bit of a different approach to High Evolutionary, I think, as opposed to just straight up just playing negative. Now, one thing I will say though is that because it spreads the negative power more effectively, it is technically a small buff to the Abomination, because the Abomination should be more likely to be lower in cost without the use of something like a Hazmat, because now the thing is spreading out its power more. So it might affect how you want to play the thing, especially since turn 1 and 2 are much more commonly being played now with the power of those types of cards. So High Evolutionary does change slightly. It's not like a massive nerf or anything, but it is a nerf nonetheless. We have a few more changes to discuss, but before that, it's worth noting that Twitch drops are coming to Marvel Snap. And so I would invite you to follow me along on Twitch. I will be one of the creators that has Twitch drops enabled to get you the rewards available at the time. So in the link, there's going to be a link in the description and in the comment section down below where you can follow along in order to ensure that you can get those rewards when they become live on Twitch. I'm live like 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week in the evenings and Eastern Standard Time. So I look forward to seeing you guys there. We have a ton of fun. And with that being said, we have a couple more minor changes. The first being the change to Magic. Magic will now actually be able to be played on turn 6. However, it won't actually trigger the effect, okay? So Limbo, you won't actually change something to Limbo, but you can play the 3/2 cost power on turn 6, right? Which is really notable. Before it was locked out. This was a patch change that had to happen because an over-the-air update was not able to actually make this change. The next change is a minor non-text change that's not reflected on the card itself, but Mr. Negative now will cap any card inverted by its ability at 6. So if you have like an Orca, for instance, it'll always just be a 6 cost when the power and the energy cost inverts. This is just a quality of life change that makes it consistent with the effect of the peak, which is a location that has the Mr. Negative style effect. Regardless though, non-text change, relatively minor, unlikely that you encounter very often, because why the hell would you play an Orca in a Mr. Negative deck, for instance? But regardless, it is important that there is some consistency with the rules of the game, and this is an improvement of that. Finally, and again, a non-text-based change. Rogue will trigger the on reveals of a card that has it when it steals its ongoing ability if it has an on reveal. For instance, like a Mystique has an on reveal that becomes an ongoing ability. Rogue can steal that, it'll re-trigger the on reveal, which is kind of notable. It's a bit of a change in the rule set on how Rogue functions, but it makes the interaction much more predictable, and of course, it makes it so that like it just makes sense. This is what the expectation around Rogue's ability would be, and so again, clarification around the function of a specific card. Regardless, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button if you'd like to support the content. And once again, we're in a great time of Marvel Snap here. Tons of changes happening. And one just might say it's a great time to be a Marvel Snap player. We'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.